All right, and we'll call the meeting to order. And we'll start with any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I know today we wanted to recognize International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. This is something we strongly condemn in the City of London and anywhere in our province and our country as well. And I know the police are very supportive of supporting those in our community. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize this week has been Police Week, May 14th to 18th, and there's been some great events that the police have been hosting. I know there's been some coffees, cop and coffee, or coffee with a cop, one of those two. And so it's much appreciated. There's some positive feedback that I've heard from the community, so I wanted to recognize that as well. I wanted to turn to the Deputy Williams for a second, just to recognize some excellence awards for some of our police service members.
Thank you. Yes, as part of our Police Week, we also had a number of our female members attend the Ontario Women in Law Enforcement Awards last week in Toronto. And a number of our members were recognized for long service, and one member who a lot of people will know is Constable Teresa Allott, who is a long-time diversity officer for the police service. She's been involved obviously in that role for a number of years, and also involved in the community on a volunteer basis and through various committees and organizations that she's been involved in. And she was the recipient of the OWL Community Service Award. So we're very proud of her for that, and commend her for all the relationships that she's built over the last several years with the London Police Service.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Sorry, go ahead, Mayor Brown.
Well, just a suggestion. I wonder, since Teresa's not able to be here with us today, if we could provide you with some direction to send a letter formally on behalf of the board, congratulating her. You've already written it down. Perfect.
I hadn't heard about that. Usually I hear about these things and
great.
You guys know, but I didn't know about that one.
Perfect. So we'll get that to her. Great. And last but not least, we have a new member of our police service board who many members in the London community don't need any introduction, but I'll take the time. Dr. Javeet Sukura, I hope I pronounced that pretty well. Okay, great. Is an assistant professor of psychiatry and pediatrics at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University in London, Ontario, where he is also the senior designate physician lead for child and adolescent psychiatry at London Health Sciences Centre. So on behalf of the London Police Service Board and on behalf of Londoners everywhere, welcome to your first official meeting. So not sure if you wanted to take a second to say hello, but wanted to give you a word. You're very humble. All right, so we'll look for any added items or any new business. Vice Chair.
I just wanted to do a quick update on an issue that we've been talking about quite a bit here, which is the use of naloxone and SIU investigations. So if we could just add that to the end of the agenda and provide an update on that. And I just wanted to make a really quick comment about the International Day Against Homophobia with the chair and the board's permission. I just wanted to take the opportunity, given that today is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, to address something that's been in the news, and that's the decision by Pride to not have police officers attend in uniform. And there was quite a bit of press around that, and I know that former Police Chief Duncan expressed some disappointment. And I just wanted to take the opportunity right now to reframe that question and that decision by Pride, and just remind people that initially the Pride movement, as powerful as it was and as important as it was, it didn't really look at that intersectional piece as much. And I wanted to suggest that that decision shouldn't be looked at as a step backward, but rather be seen as a community that is feeling very empowered, and that actually is a real, it shows that trust that that community feels, that it can go to the police services and say, listen, this year, not this year. And I hope that we can see that actually as a positive, that it shows that the community feels comfortable enough to say, this is a decision we want to do. And those things change, and it's all part of the evolving relationship between that community, and in particular, the Black and Indigenous community who are part of the LGBT group. And again, I just want to take the opportunity to reframe that, because I know it was reported on mostly in a negative fashion in terms of the disappointment.
So I wanted, so we have the added items would be the SIU naloxone, as well as the board receives the supervised consumption sites draft board motion, item number 11, as two added items. So look for a mover for those two. Moved by the mayor, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? And it carries. So any questions on the minutes from April 13th? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to receive. Moved by Susan, seconded by Helmer. All those in favor? And it carries. Human Resources Report, Deputy Longworth. Is there any questions for him, or if you wanted to start off? Any questions for the deputy? Seeing none, we'll take a motion to receive. Moved by Javid, seconded by Helmer. All those in favor? Carries. All right, public correspondence. So that the board receives formal, for informational purposes, the letter from the Honorable Mary Francois Lalonde, Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services in response to the London Police Services Board, February 23rd, 2018, letter regarding court security and prisoner transportation program, CSPT cost, and the letter from Durham Regional Public Police Service Board to the Ministry endorsing London Police Services, February 23rd, 2018 letter regarding the inadequacy of the CSPT program and costs. So it's great to see Durham support us. So just wanted to acknowledge that. That was the letter that was related to the cost, and I know that was worked with administration as well. So that's some good news. So just look for a motion for that to receive. Moved by Javid, seconded by Helmer. All those in favor? And it carries. 2017 Criminal Investigations Report. Deputy Williams. Any questions for the deputy on that particular item? Helmer?
Yeah, thank you. I know we just have 3 years of information in front of us, so I recognize that, but it seems to be a pretty significant increase in auto theft investigations, and I wonder if Deputy wants to speak to that.
Yes, we observed an increase early last year in auto thefts, and it wasn't just in London, it was sort of throughout the province, but we did have a problem here in London, which we engaged in a couple of joint force projects with other police services, and there was a small group of individuals involved in a lot of those offenses. It's something that we continue to monitor, so once we put the fire out, so to speak, you gotta keep watching it because those individuals may become active again. So it's not unusual to see the ups and downs, particularly with auto thefts.
Thank you. And just looking at the second part, and when we're looking at the clearance rates, there are a number of areas where the London Police Services is a significantly higher clearance rate than the provincial numbers we're seeing and the national numbers. And I know it might vary across the different kind of offenses and investigations, but I wonder if you'd speak to that. I mean, I think it's quite interesting that we're really having very high numbers in some of these areas.
Yes, the clearance rates are always, they're interesting because they change from year to year. For example, the clearance rates from 2017 will change because a lot of those investigations are still ongoing and active. So they'll be cleared by charge, many of them in due course. But the fact that we were able to clear so many, I think just speaks to the work of our investigators. So we're happy about that.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, look for a motion to receive the report. Moved by Susan, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. Great. And back to Williams. Mandatory report 2017 hate/bias motivated crime.
So I know there's been, excuse me, a number of questions about the statistics, and I think what everybody needs to just keep in mind is, first off, these statistics are a measure of reporting behavior, which goes up and down and changes due to the the type of offense and public awareness and public comfort in coming forward. And we believe some of those reasons are why some of our statistics show an increase. I can tell you that our street gang unit that has within its portfolio the hate crime file has developed a bit more increased focus over the last few years, and a bit more awareness, not only among their own members, but they've delivered some training to our frontline members. So I think our officers generally are more in tune with what's going on in the community and more educated. So when they attend calls for service, they will identify hate crime, probably more so than they did in the past. So that could be one reason why the reporting is up. And also, I do think there's a greater comfort level in the community in coming forward and reporting incidents. Some of them may never result in a charge. It may not be ultimately classified as a hate crime, but we still track it as a hate incident. So in that respect, the increase in reporting is probably a good thing if people are more comfortable coming forward. It's something we continue to watch. One other possible reason is we have probably a more or a stronger online presence than we ever really had, and even over the last couple of years. So now we find that we've been tagged on Twitter and all the other social media in various photos and conversations, and we've had a number of complaints come to us via that route, which wouldn't have happened even a couple of years ago. So overall, I don't think we need to sound the alarm button. It's something we need to look at through, a number of years, 3 to 5 years, I would suggest minimum. But it's something we continue to watch. And again, the fact that people are feeling more comfortable coming forward, I think is probably key, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Thanks, Deputy. I'll look to the board for any questions. So, Vanessa?
Just a question about the data. Has there ever been any comparison to the upward trend of reports of hate crimes as compared to the other Big 12?
We have done some data comparisons in the past. I don't have any figures with me right now. I know we're relatively comparable, but one thing that is a bit of an issue is consistency in reporting. And we are better at tracking these incidents now than we used to be. So these are probably more accurate than previous reports the board may have received.
And just one last question about that. Are there, standardized ways of categorizing these offenses across the different police services?
I would suggest that's probably one of the problems, is there may not be. We have our own process in place for flagging incidents that involve hate, which isn't always the same as a hate crime. Hate crime legislation is triggered at a sentencing phase. That's how we track it. So as I said earlier, the incidents of hate may not necessarily be ultimately classified as hate crime. What other services do may differ.
I guess not through anyone, but to you, Deputy Williams, I had a question, just to follow up on what Vanessa was saying. So there seems to be, it's not necessarily standardization when it comes to the reporting piece. Do you feel like maybe there'd be a value if the province-wide to better interpret the data? Because I know when it comes to combating hate crimes and things like that and trends and figuring things out, clear data from everyone would be appreciated. So I'm just wondering, is there value for this board to advocate to the province to kind of look into that?
Well, it wouldn't hurt. I don't know to what extent it is standardized. I mean, police statistics in general are as you know, are always an issue, and how police services locally record crime has never been entirely consistent. How they code it. We've had coding conversations in the past. So, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have a standardized method of tracking it.
So maybe at the end of this piece, what I'll do is I'll step out of the chair and put a motion to that effect, but I'll wait at that time. I'm just looking for any other speakers on this item. Councillor Helmer?
In terms of the other activities, there's the reporting on the offenses and then there's reporting on other activities. And I wonder if you could speak to what some of those things actually mean. You know, there's a line there for formal victim interventions, and I wonder if you could expand on what that is. And then there's a pretty significant increase in the activity that's described as monitor peaceful demonstration. And if you look back over the last couple of years, those are very low numbers, and now we're into the 19 level, which is a lot higher. So I wonder if you could speak to that as well.
That's a really good question, because a lot of work that this unit does is intelligence-based and does not always reflect in actual enforcement statistics. So some of the other activities they do, first off, is just educating. So they've done a lot of education and information sessions with schools and different community organizations, as well as other police officers, frontline officers. They've been involved in some victim interventions. So a victim who may make a report to the police that may not result in any criminal charge, still requires some support. So they do that. And the peaceful demonstrations is a really good point, because I believe last year we monitored somewhere in the neighborhood of 19 or 20 peaceful demonstrations, which again, may not result in enforcement action, but there is an information gathering and the monitoring aspect. The year before we had 4. So that's probably the way of the future at this point, that those activities will be something they're gonna have to keep on top of.
Looking for any other speakers? Vice Chair?
Just a point of clarification. So the numbers here are reported based on what's ultimately classified as a hate crime at the sentencing stage. Is that correct? Because I just noticed that there's one homicide in 2017 that was hate crime related.
So these are hate incidents, and we don't track it at time of sentencing. So what you'll see is the number of hate incidents, and then there may be criminal charges, may or may not be criminal charges associated with those. But what happens in sentencing is very difficult for us to track. So these are just the actual incidents.
Looking for the board, any other discussion? I did have a question just on trends. I know you touched on the online presence and social media. And have we seen kind of, and I know you don't have to get too specific, but has there been more hate incidents just from social media? Like, I guess, I don't want to dive into the definition of the criminal code or anything like that, but have you seen an uptake on more incidents happening online of hate-related items? And I just wonder, with now the emergence of social media, if that could contribute to the increased number of incidents that maybe happen in the community. I just wonder if you have any feedback on that.
I think across the board with pick a criminal offense that somebody's talking about it, or there's some aspect of online, either online reporting or, the conversations and the photos that are exchanged. I don't have any numbers that we've tracked that specifically for hate crime, but I think it's a fair comment, because as I said, we've been tagged in certain conversations and photos that are brought to our attention just because our service is tagged and included, that wouldn't have happened before, so more than likely.
Great. Would it be cumbersome to have that more of a dive into kind of understanding some of those statistics, or would that just kind of would it be helpful or would it not be helpful, I guess, if we had that understanding or appreciation? Because from my perspective, it seems like maybe it would be recognizing, because that's going to rise, and then recognizing that there's going to be more demand on resources down the road, hypothetically, if now with social media being available, so we might see more of those incidents. So just from the board level and understanding the budgetary impacts they may come.
I think with most criminal investigations nowadays, part of that investigation, most significant investigations, involve some type of investigation online. Should we track this particular type of crime in terms of collecting those stats? It would be interesting and helpful. Regardless if it comes to our attention and our investigation takes us into social media, we're going to be doing that anyway. So we don't have those numbers right now. It's something we could look at.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So maybe for next year, we'll leave it at that. So I did have that motion, which was, I guess, in consultation maybe with administration to advocate to the ministry to have a standardization. I know there was still some questions that weren't fully answered, if there is standardization or not. Maybe we could work with that with the administration, but I just wanted to put that letter forward and just get the board support. So I'll move that, but I'll ask the vice chair to chair and call the question when she's ready.
So I have a motion from the chair. Do we have a seconder? Javid? Any discussion? All in favor? Passed.
All right, and I'll take the chair back. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. So we still need to receive that report related to the hate and bias motivated crimes. So unless there's any further discussion, we'll call the question. Moved by Susan, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? and it carries. Number 9, disposition of unclaimed money. Mayor Brown, moved by the mayor, seconded by Susan. Any questions or debate? Call the question. All those in favor? And it carries. All right, so as members of the public and our audience will notice, that the board is a bigger group now, and we have new members as well. So right now we have 3 subcommittees: the Legal, Governance, and Policy Committee, the Budget and Negotiations, and the Community Relations. And we're going to be looking for interest from Vanessa as well as Javid to see which interest they had in those committees. And then after that, we will be seeing if there was anyone interested in sitting as chairs for those particular subcommittees. So, Javid?
I'd like to express an interest in the Community Relations Subcommittee.
Vanessa?
I'd also like to request interest in the public, thank you, community relations.
Perfect. So and feel free, anyone, if anyone still wants to join more than 1 or 2, that's fine. But before we call the question, just because we'll have to move and see if there's anyone else from any interest. Javid?
I think that it's important we have enough resources to be able to take the necessary deep dive, and therefore also, with some trepidation, put my name forward for the Policy and Governance Committee.
Sounds great. I think they'll probably need a doctor there, so. All right, so the motion will be Javid will sit on Legal Governance Policy Committee, and Susan and Javid will also sit on the Community Relations. So we'll look for a motion to move that. Moved by Susan, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. All right, so now we're gonna look for a chair for each of the 3 subcommittees. So we'll start with the first one, Legal Governance Policy Committee. And so only the members who are currently sitting on that committee, which is Susan, Jesse Helmer, and Javid, just look for someone who's be interested in sitting as a chair of that Governance Policy Committee. All right.
Put my name forward.
Susan, all right. So Susan, so look for a motion to second that, or mover, Helmer, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. So Susan, welcome to the new job. The LGP. The LGP committee. So budget and negotiations, oh geez, it's just me and Helmer. Okay. So Helmer, you interested? Sure. All right, there he goes. So seconded by the mayor. Moved by me, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. And the last one, community relations. So we have Susan Toth, Mayor Brown, Javid, and Vanessa. So look to see if anyone's interested in being the chair of that. Was that a hand? No? Okay, Javid. All right, so Javid will be the chair of the community relations. Oh, sorry, we got to vote on that. So I'll move by Susan, seconded by the mayor. Any questions? All those in favor? And it carries. Perfect, so we are done with that. So if you have a complaint, reach out to those chairs and not me. Gotcha. All right, number 11, safe consumption sites. We have a verbal. Vice Chair Susan, the floor is yours.
There is a written report. It was just a little bit delayed in getting to your packages. So essentially, my intention is to bring a motion today for the London Police Services Board to endorse safe consumption sites, or supervised consumption sites rather, based on the presentation that Dr. Mackey of the Public Health Unit provided to us back in October of last year, in addition to the mounting evidence that shows that it is not only cost effective, not only does it save lives, but it has no appreciable increase in any criminal activity as a result. And if anything, there's a decrease in some of the neighborhood concerns around the crisis we're facing, such as drug paraphernalia litter, public use of drugs and so on. So I do have a written report. I won't go through it in detail because I'm sure everyone's able to read it. But my motion is 3 parts. I do want to note a change in B. I just want to take out the word safety. It wasn't my intention to have it in there, but it might be helpful to read out the motion first. Okay, so the motion is Part A, that the London Police Services Board, after hearing from Dr. Mackey, London's Chief Medical Officer last October, and in light of the numerous studies showing the benefits of supervised consumption sites, including saving lives and lack of adverse impacts, endorses supervised consumption sites. B, that the London Police Services Board defers to and supports the expertise of the Public Health Unit in choosing the appropriate sites based on the evidence of community needs and availability of sites. And C, that the London Police Services Board recognizes that supervised consumption sites must be part of an overall strategy in addressing addictions, and that we call for all stakeholders to continue to commit the necessary funds, energy, and resources to addressing poverty, mental health, and the opioid crisis. And sorry, just to back up very quickly, I meant to mention that Chief Perry has been absolutely instrumental in doing really amazing work with the opioid crisis working group, and from day one has been very open about wanting to take that dignity-centered approach to dealing with this crisis, while also continuously reminding us that that is not the be-all, end-all cure. It is just one piece of the puzzle, and we have to continue to advocate for, again, that multi-pronged approach. So I wanted to give the chief some recognition and honor the work that he's done in that regard.
So it's been moved by Susan, seconded by the mayor. Look for, Mayor, you have the floor if you want to speak. And then Javid, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you also to Board Member Toth for bringing this forward. I'm very happy to second this. I'm also very happy to recognize the amount of work that Chief Perry, that both of our deputy chiefs, that the London Police Service has done to address this issue. It's a crisis. It's a crisis that's happening right across Canada. We need to take an approach that I think is new and different, and sometimes that can create a concern based on misunderstandings in a community. And so it's really important for organizations like the London Police Service Board to come forward and to say, this is something that we endorse. We've looked at this over the past year. We trust the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and we recognize that we are in a public health crisis. And the fact of the matter is people are dying. There have been 400 Londoners in the past 10 years that have lost their life to this situation, and people are suffering as well. I had the opportunity this morning to tour the temporary overdose prevention site with Dr. Mackey and others just before it opened, and I can tell you the staff there are doing incredible work. This is the first temporary overdose prevention site in Ontario, and that's something that we should be proud of as a community. And I had a chance to see firsthand what the conditions are of the space in the area around the overdose prevention site. It's clean, it's free from litter, there are no needles, and I think that this is just another part of the narrative that we need to make sure that we're supporting as we move in this direction. And lastly, and I say it because I know this is being watched by people from home, HIV in Ontario, the rates are on the decline, and in London, they're on the increase. That can be said for hepatitis C as well. And also there's a terrible blood infection called endocarditis that is something that our physicians and our healthcare workers are dealing with on a regular basis. So this will help with all of that, but at the end of the day, each and every person that uses these services are individuals in our community, and they deserve dignity, they deserve our respect, they deserve our care, and quite frankly, they deserve our love too. And so I'm very pleased to second this motion.
Javid?
I'd also like to speak in favor of the motion and add to Vice Chair Toth and Mayor Brown's commendation of our chief for being a role model for others in terms of addressing this issue with compassion. I think it's very important that we be very clear as a police services board that this is an issue that can become emotionally charged. This is an issue that can be deflected and easily kicked away from the community safety tables where it needs to be. But in addition to our partners in public health, healthcare, community social services, we need to be leading the way as police services boards, as well as members of this sector, to say that addressing stigma, which is an issue that kills people, is part of our responsibility. This is not a solution that belongs in a silo. It's a solution that we must unite as a community to address. It's also a situation that unfortunately other organizations have approached in a very stigmatizing way, with comments that are misinformed, that dehumanize individuals who suffer from mental illness and addictions. So I laud us for taking this step forward. Thank you for bringing this forward. I'm proud to support it, and proud to be part of a police services board that's taken a serious look at addressing this issue with the best evidence available, and with a commitment to compassion and dignity for all members of our community.
Look to see if any other board members. Vanessa?
I'd also like to speak in support of this particular motion. You know, just coming from a perspective in working with Indigenous populations particularly, I think some of the statistics that are not often recognized are with respect to First Nations people, and at the risk of, you know, reinforcing a negative stereotype about Indigenous people and drug use, I wanted to comment on the fact that we often don't recognize the impact that this is having within that community. And just knowing that 1 in 5 Aboriginal people in London have used a prescription opioid in the last year without a prescription, with over a third of those being used every day. And that's from the most recent statistics we have through the Our Health Counts London report in 2016. And also that almost 1 in 5 injection drug users self-identify as Aboriginal in London, with 4% noting that they've shared a needle. So to me, when I start to look at the burden of impact and where we start to see people being disproportionately, you know, I guess, part of a crisis situation, I just want to make note that having an Indigenous focus within these strategies and having the recognition that, you know, sometimes in this work we do need to be aware that there are inequities in terms of where we might see support placed. I just wanted to point out the fact that, you know, south of London right now, we're in the midst of an overdose crisis. So the 3 First Nations have signaled to us that in March alone, there were 9 overdoses. But I also want to just recognize the support that the Middlesex London Health Unit has had in providing access to naloxone, because in this situation, naloxone was used in all 9 of those overdoses, and as a result, lives have been saved. But in terms of, you know, just starting to trigger our understanding of the scope of this crisis, I just wanted to speak to that and just be mindful that as we endorse the use of supervised consumption sites and effective harm reduction, we also have to keep in mind the connection and the opportunity to work towards collaborative solutions to address you know, more sustainable solutions and treatment-focused approaches. Thank you.
Councillor Helmer?
Well, I want to say thank you to my colleagues for their comments, especially Vanessa. I think that's a very good point about where the burden is currently falling, and then the people who are being harmed the most from the way that we're treating this addiction issue in the community up until this point. And I think it's really important. We know from even the research that was done in terms of the feasibility of supervised consumption services that we had surveyed in that research, 199 people. 22% of the people who responded to that survey identified as First Nations or Métis. And so the burden is not equally shared amongst the community. We also know a lot of other things that came out of that research, and I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about the issue. I also did want to say, you know, there's a 4 pillars kind of approach, which is becoming more commonplace now in terms of dealing with addictions issues. One is, you know, harm reduction, which is what we're talking about here, and I think that's an important one. As a police service board, we're more familiar, I guess, with the enforcement pillar. And I do want to give an opportunity to, I know the Chief Perry is not here, but perhaps one of the deputies wants to weigh in on how, you know, trying to police ourselves out of an addictions issue has gone so far and why people are supportive of the four pillars approach, because I think it's very clear that enforcement alone is not the solution. And I think sometimes people need to hear that from the people who are actually doing the enforcement side to say, you know, like, look, we can recognize the limits of what this part of the strategy can do, and we recognize there's these other parts that are also important.
Well, we recognize that this is, it's an epidemic, and it not only affects addicts and their family and their friends and their neighborhoods, but it's a community problem. It's a citywide problem. And it's not a matter of a police service being able to, you know, arrest their way out of this or to charge anybody. If you look back over decades, how's that worked? Hasn't worked. So it's our commitment that we will partner as just that, a partner with healthcare and with other community organizations to reduce the harm. We do occasionally have to invoke our public safety mandate. That is our mandate, but we can do that in other ways, as I said, than arresting our way out of these situations. And I think the chief and Deputy Chief Longworth and I have demonstrated that we're involved in the community organizations, have been for some time, and with Dr. Mackey in working together to solve this problem, and that's our intent.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to echo, I think it really requires all different kinds of organizations across the community to work together. I mean, this is a very large problem. It's not something that's going to be solved overnight. This is just one piece of reducing the harms in the immediate term. Frankly, a lot of the things that happen further upstream about preventing people from developing addictions in the first place, creating better social connections, and trying to avoid some of the problems that lead people into addictions, making sure that they get treatment and access into treatment when they're ready for that, and that it's effective. You know, these are all things that have to happen too, and this is just one part. So I'm glad to support the motion from Vice Chair Toth.
Any other board members? Great. I'll just add briefly, I support the motion, and I know just as early as yesterday, our deputies were, you know, educating themselves on this topic. I know they were outside of our city at a conference, I believe, specifically around this. So it's great to see that this is a new conversation for them. It's an ongoing conversation for our administration, and as well as everyone around this board. So without further ado, we'll call the question. Oh, sorry, it's been moved by you, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. So number 12, new business. I know Susan had an item she brought regarding SIU, so turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a quick update to the public. As members of the public may or may not know, the Safer Ontario Act did receive royal assent. The majority of the act does not come into force until 2020, but there are some sections of the act that are going to come into force June 30th, 2018, so about a month away, a month and a bit. And one of those areas that are coming into force is a new regulation called Immediate Medical Care Regulation. And essentially this regulation is going to direct that the SIU not investigate an incident in which an official provided immediate medical care to an affected person. And then there's some more details into that, but essentially for the purposes of this update, it's the way of addressing the concern that the use of naloxone by police officers would subject them to lengthy SIU investigations. And even though I know police officers will always choose saving lives over anything else, it certainly would have been an additional stress and burden on them. So I want to commend the government for putting that regulation into place, and that regulation is going to be coming into force sooner rather than 2020, given the crisis we're in right now.
See if there's any other speakers. All right, I'll just add, I know, just to give you some folks some background on this, the board had took a position on this to advocate to the ministry to have this gap addressed, because we felt it was unfair. I know we wanted to echo the voices of Ontario associations of chiefs of police, and many of the associations across Ontario just said this was completely unfair and unreasonable. So I'm glad to see that there's some movement on this file. So thank you, Susan, for bringing an update to us. So we'll just, I guess, just receive that for a motion. Moved by Reed, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. So the date of the next meeting will be Thursday, June 21st, 2018, here at City Hall, just so you're aware. And before we adjourn, I just want members of the public to know that many of the items that we go through here today, there's agendas with them all, so sometimes you see us not ask questions on specific things, because unless there's further questions or clarifications, but sometimes administration does such a good job at just answering the questions that there's no need sometimes for those discussions. And for those following at home, I know there was questions about what time we usually start. It's usually 1 p.m. and for the public, but we're usually here from 9 a.m. working on other items related to the Police Service Board role. So look for a motion to adjourn the public portion of the meeting. Moved by the mayor, seconded by Susan. All those in favor? And it carries. And before anyone disappears, as you all know, we have an open mic opportunity for members of the public. At the end of every board meeting, members of the public are given 5 minutes to speak to the board directly in relation to our roles in capacity as board members. So I'll give 3 opportunities to check. I know that someone had reached out to me earlier wanting to speak, but I don't see the gentleman here today. So going once, going twice, 3 times. Thank you very much. See you next June. Or on Twitter.